Welcome to Jnanarjane Empowering Excellence. Friends, we have reached the third day of our 3 days information technology workshop. The day one we learned blockchain, cryptocurrency and tally frame. Yesterday we learned on cloud computing. Today we have very interesting topic. For all of us, it is very interesting because the various opportunities available for chartered accountants in information technology. To enlighten us, to inform us what all the opportunities we can look into that, what all the opportunities we can encash it. So an expert on that, person who is doing in that practice, a chartered accountant, CA Nrasimhan Elangovan is with us. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of all the participants here, hearty welcome to CA Nrasimhan. Hearty welcome, Nrasimhan.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, we have with us our Vice Chairman Srinivas with us. He joined just now. Hearty welcome, Srinivas.
Thank you, sir.
We have Branch Secretary CA Divya is with us. Hearty welcome to Divya. Friends, participants, you are the reason for this program. So information technology is taking over a lot of our practice. However, that itself is a great opportunity for all of us. So learning information technology and adopting that makes us efficient in delivery, improves the quality and various other things we can learn and make that itself a practice. In that regard, we have organized this 3 days program to understand the basic nitty-gritty of that. In that regard, you all registered. I'm sure all of you enriched yourself in last 2 days program. Today, let us understand the various opportunities available for chartered accountants. Hearty welcome to each one of you. I'll inform just a second of yours to inform you there are various other programs. Women's Conference is organized and planned on 24th of this month. I request all the women members to register for that program, inform your friends and colleagues about this program and register for that. And many other programs also lined up in this month. I request please visit bangalore.ica.org and know the programs available. Whichever is interesting to you, please register. Also inform your friends and colleagues to register for that program and looking forward your support to the branch programs. With that note, once again, hearty welcome to each one of you. Over to Srinivas. You want to talk something?
Yeah, just I'll greet.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, Nrasimhan sir. Good evening, Chairman. And
good evening.
I welcome all the participants for the today's program. As Shetty sir told, information technology is taking over a lot of our job. I can say making it easy for youngsters, making it difficult for elders. Maybe senior members, those who are not acquainted with the system and this thing, they may face little problem, but youngsters, there is a good opportunity. There are like big companies like Infosys, Wipro, they are all using RPA, data analytics, so many other upcoming opportunities there. But we can say only 5% of the members group will know actually using the information technology and advantages of that. Only 5%. I think if I'm wrong, Nrasimhan sir, you can correct me. We are not at all using at all. If you make use of it and we can make much benefit out of that. Only thing we have to follow our faculties like Nrasimhan sir, Anand Jangir and other faculties. Very few faculties are practicing in those areas. Few means we can count only 1 or 2 now. It is like that. We should make use of it and make best benefit out of this. With this, I welcome you all once again. Over to MC. Thank you.
So over to Divya, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Vice Chairman, for the
low bandwidth.
present on the topic. Yes, sir.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Members, today we have Nrasimhan sir to present on topic technology-enabled opportunities for CA professionals. To give a very brief introduction about him, is by qualification BCom, FCA, CS, visa, gentleman IF.
Not able to hear you, Divya. IT program, technical problem.
Muted, sir.
He need not requires many introduction because well known in Bangalore. Okay. Once again, hearty welcome. Over to Narasimhan.
Sure. Thank you. Technology is one such, it will work 24/7, except when the time you want it to work. On that lighter note, let me quickly get started. I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me a heads up if you're able to see this. Can somebody confirm if you're able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you, Srinivasa. Thank you, Shetty
Thank you,
sir, for giving this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to discuss and share my thoughts. And today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick on to some basics, and I'm going to say what are the opportunities which is there in this technology domain field. And let me remind you from a technology standpoint.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Divya, I think Narasimhan already started the session. Okay, thank you. Yes, please, Narasimhan, go
Okay,
ahead.
sir. Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No problem. No problem. Okay. So I'm going to speak of technology-enabled opportunities and where our profession is heading in a few days. And a lot of things are changing, and it's time we actually start gearing up. And I've been emphasizing or speaking on this fact with many very years, and people have realized that yes, this is perhaps the COVID-19 is one such movement which has actually created that sort of a mindset. Okay, so what I'm going to speak of. The slide to come, but before that, a quick introduction about myself. I'm Nrasimhan Elangovan, practicing chartered accountant. My predominant focus is on technology. I've been able to do a whole lot of things from the technology space and interesting and exciting opportunities. And let me also tell you that the sky is the limit in this field because it is often untapped and a whole lot of new things are coming up day in and day out. And not just that, I've also authored a couple of not just couple, I think about close to about 6 or 8 odd books for the institute. It could be the KSCA digitizing CA practice I wrote. There is this digital competency maturity model for the DAB, our ICI, DISA module 6, virtual guide for accounting firm, virtual guide for how firms can become strategic or a digitalized firm, and technical guide on Internet of Things. So these are all a bunch of things which I have probably authored. These are all available mostly in the public forum. You can feel free to pick up them and read. General view, the thoughts are completely personal, nothing to do with my organization. Okay, so I thought I will take you through a few broad perspective of where we actually see the whole lot of IT audit or technology enabled services coming up. It could be from an IT audit angle. It could be from a regulatory framework angle. It could be from a IT general controls audit. It could be from an internal financial control center, correct? And there is something called as a forensic audit, which is again increasing in scope. You have the ISO 27001 data privacy related standards are of course there. Then you have the SOC, which is the service organization controls. Data analytics, that itself is coming up as a huge field within the space. And there are some things on the emerging technologies such as the blockchain, the crypto, RPA, and bunch of these things which is actually taking place. So of course, emerging technology, I'm not going to spend too much on it. I will give you some links where you can probably look upon it, or you can reach out to me a little later. We can discuss on that. So I thought I'll focus on these and what exactly we do on this and what is the potential market in all of these spaces. Okay. So first I thought I'll focus on the IT audit piece. What exactly is an IT audit? See, today we all are living in sort of an automated environment. Everything directly or indirectly, there's some amount of automation. And this level of automation varies, fluctuates, differs. But yes, it is there. There are companies where technology is extremely high, people and process are fairly limited. There are companies where technology is only to a limited extent, but the process is driving it. There are companies where it's the people who are driving it. But the problem with the people driving any organization is that the moment people change, the consistency changes. It is like a simple cricket match. If the team combination changes, invariably you expect some sort of a impact, right? It may be good impact or a bad impact, but it will definitely be there. Likewise, if organizations are more and more dependent on people, it becomes a challenge. So I would say this people, process, and technology is a triangle. This is a very, very critical thing which you have to bear in mind, because you need to manage all these three things when you do the way organizations scale up. And typically, if you look into organizations which are automated, they consist of a bunch of technological driven systems. Sorry, beg your pardon. I think. Yeah. So if you look into any of these organizations, typically they have these information systems, and these are driven by technology. And don't think that okay, Tally they have, and therefore they're fully automated. They're using Zoho books, they're fully automated. No, that's not the case. Automation is, or a use of technology is something which will keep on increasing. It is like you getting more and more accustomed to it, and you getting more and more people away from it and putting it on the technology and say, boss, you do it. The human element is only going to be to the value addition. That's where you're going to get into the focus. We have a very, very simple high level thought process. If you look into a package software, it could be a Tally or a QuickBooks. It could be small ERPs, SAP B1, Focus ERP, or it could be ERPs used in the medium and large companies, SAP, R3, you have S4 HANA, Oracle R12, Enterprise Business Suite, and a bunch of these things. All of them have their inbuilt logic entered into it. The focus of an IT audit is you trying to understand what exactly goes within this. And very, very important is when you do an IT audit, you understand what are the layers. This is very critical for you. Why do I say it's very critical? Because you need to understand what are the layers involved within this IT audit. Just like when you say a financial statements, we have a balance sheet, we have a P&L account, we have a cash flow statement, we have a SOC, statement of changes of equity, and you have a bunch of those things, and you see from the source to the ultimate reporting, from the record to the report, you go through the entire process, see what the controls are, how it's been working. Likewise, any IT environment, there are multiple things. The database. Now, database refers to the system where the data is actually recorded and stored. In a layman's language, if I have to probably put it, compared to our own physical office, there is a rack where files, papers, IT returns, whatever you have kept it. Now, if I say that, hey, you're discussing with a client, can you bring 15, 16 assessment year one file? Correct? Now you are requesting to your office boy or to your colleague, or you sometimes yourself go and pick it up. Okay, let's say for simplicity sake, you're requesting your colleague. Your colleague goes there, searches and gets it. Now, wherever he searches, that is basically a database. That is a database. That's a physical database, of course. Here we are talking about an electronic database. Now, in order for him to search, correct, you require a platform. You require a place. That place is your office. That office is your operating system. It could be a Windows, it could be a Linux. correct? It is the place where it is, and it is stored. You may have a lock and key, etc. That's a storage device. And from your place or your cabin to reach that particular premise, there is a path he has to take. That is the network, correct? And that network, in order to access that, you may have some devices, you may have a path, and you may have some physical controls. So bunch of all of this. I just give you a gist how a physical you picking up a file is compared to you picking up a file in a system. Let's take a fairly, close to us, what we use in our day in and day out offices, a tally-based system. In a tally-based system, what are we looking at? We want to access a particular file. Now, in our own offices, we have something called as the tally server, and there's something called some other application. Now, this so-called some other application or some other PC is used to access the tally server. Now, when you are trying to do that, what happens? The challenge out there is you are trying to connect to the server using a LAN network, correct? And the database is stored in the server. The application, the logic, the business logic is stored within the PC, which is the tally software, and that's how you're trying to reach it. The third scenario could be, how are you trying to reach out, or how are you trying to reach out an SAP sort of an environment, and you're operating from home, a work from home environment. So you are in a work from home environment. You have what is called as a virtual private network, a VPN, which is a network layer. It is connecting your PC or your laptop to the office server, which is, let us say, you talk about any of these large companies, Infosys, TCS, Tata, Bata, whatever. It's stored there, and from your laptop you're reaching out there, and that's how the connection is. Now, considering that is the conduit through which you are actually reaching out, that becomes a network layer, and you are accessing the SAP business application. That's the application layer, and then you have the database layer where the data resides. So please bear it in mind that there is a clear distinction. Even in our mobile phones also, there is a clear distinction. Your photos get stored in gallery. That's, you can assume it to be a simplicity's sake, a database. Your application through which you're sending that photo is a WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is an application layer. And your WhatsApp runs on what? Android or iOS. That's an operating system. You require a Wi-Fi or an internet connection. That's your network devices, correct? So these layers, understanding from an enterprise level, if you're able to look into it, each of this has an element of risk. And that risk, if you're able to identify and demystify, that is where the layers of automated environment becomes very handy. It comes, if you took into from a real-time scenario, I think I gave this example, so I'm not going to spend too much time into this. Now, if you look into from an IT audit, I'm not going into the depth of it. This session is not to give you an explanation of what an IT audit is. There are a few other sessions where I've spoken. Please pick it up in YouTube. You can look into it. The focus over here is to say what exactly is the opportunities. If you look from a regulatory framework, the Companies Act makes a mention of internal financial controls. Okay, of course, I'll speak of IFC itself a little later. Okay, this internal financial controls, let me tell you, is a mammoth opportunity which is untapped by professionals, by chartered accountants. Why? Any company other than the exempt category, they've given exemption for all these SME companies, okay, they need to demonstrate that they have internal financial controls in place. And when I use the word internal financial controls, these are controls which are fairly open, or which are system driven, process driven, etc., etc. And these controls, let me tell you, my dear friends, are something which you have to define, you have to audit, and not just audit. You need to audit and give a perspective of, say, hey, this is the end impact, or this is the end result, or this is the operating effectiveness of those controls. And operating effectiveness of controls is something which is not very easy, which you can get it. It is something which is not very easy. So I think we need to look into operating effectiveness very carefully. Like a simple example, you may have a control, a simple security guard, but the security guard is often sleeping. And you caught him not just once, you caught him at least 3 or 4 times in a month. So that means you have a control, but the control doesn't work at all. What is the point in it? So that's an operating effectiveness. correct? You may have a refrigerator. The refrigerator may have all the items beautifully arranged, correct? That's the design. But there is a huge power fluctuation. There is a huge power fluctuation, let's say 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. As a result, most of the time the refrigerator ran out of power and the entire system fails. Correct? So I hope you're able to get what I'm trying to say. So that way things continuously keep changing. That's where your internal financial. So audit of internal financial controls, implementation, consulting, design, there's a huge opportunities there. Second, IRD. The Insurance Regulatory Development Authority has mentioned that all insurers shall have their systems and processes audited at least once in 3 years by a CA firm. Once in 3 years by a CA firm. Which means you need to have a mandatory requirement of an information system audit for all insurance companies. Look into the number of cases of insurance company we have. So many times people keep on saying, sir, I am a newly qualified member, I am a new professional. How do I get the audits of IRDA? Sir, you cannot get everything onto your doorstep. You will have to reach out for that. It will take some time. But what you can do in this process is start doing small engagements where you'll be able to acquire this. Okay, of course, towards the end, just remind me in case I miss it. I'll talk about what are the qualifications which are over and above CA. If you want to pick up anything, what are the other additional qualifications which you can think of? You can probably go pick it up and see how you can, get yourself acquainted with these interesting things. Right? So all insurers shall have their systems and processes audited at least once in 3 years, and this is a requirement by the CFO, IRT. Beg your pardon. Now, not just this, there is something under the IRDA called insurance intermediary regulations. There is something called insurance e-commerce regulations. Insurance e-commerce regulations is basically what you can do is you can see if companies today are coming up with online platforms to sell insurance. And that is also another opportunity for you to audit, because there is a mandatory requirement that you shall be having a regular audit system in place. These are just a few examples, my dear friends. The list keeps on going. You just have to go and browse through your IRDA website and you get a bunch of these requirements. Correct? And this is something which is really, really worthwhile, which you can probably look into. Correct? And it's called as an insurance self-network platform. Let me also see if I can share my one other screen. Are you able to see this web screen? Can somebody just give me a confirmation? You can. Yes, fantastic, thank you. So if you look into this, my dear friends, here is the simple screen where it says that IRDA. I can give this. Of course, I have it is saved onto my system. What I can do is I can send you in the chat window to everybody. You can probably even download it. Now here the IRDA clearly says that, hey, there are a bunch of opportunities available. You have to just scroll down here and see what you can do. Correct? Application for grant of permission, what is called as an insurance self-networking platform. Okay, now this is the regulations for it. And here it says that you need to compulsory be subject to audit. Okay, if you go through it, it speaks about it. Look, the applicant shall place a report of the CISA auditor or DISA auditor, qualified expert or a certain expert, and the information security management before the board and the subcommittee. This is an annual affair. Many companies, in fact, come forward and do 6 months. There are a lot of companies who have their own digital platform, correct? Even if you take up a simple ICICI Lombard, okay, and you can go visit their website and you can actually pick up an insurance policy, which means this is an insurance e-commerce platform, correct? So this has to be subject to an audit, and that's exactly what they make a mention of it. Let me quickly come back to my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so that is just one case, my dear friends. Again, there are a bunch of other cases. I think it's worthwhile for you to go ahead and explore that case. Now, see, what I'm talking about is two things. One, where is the opportunity? Two, what is it that we can do? Correct. So these are two very critical things, and it's highly recommended that you actually start looking into this on a serious note. Let's look into the next thing. RBI, the banks, the NBFCs, the cooperative, the regional rural bank, all of them have information system audit requirements. All of them. And let me tell you, this is a huge potential. All NBFCs have to be subject to a mandatory audit every year. Okay, and they have bifurcated this into less than 500 crore, more than 500 crore. Banks, I think they have a feature where once in 2 years they can go ahead and do it. Cooperatives have since last year come within the ambit of RBI, so which means for them also these regulations would be applicable. So I think it makes a lot of sense for you to go ahead and explore these opportunities, and please be very, very careful. Do not try to give a very, very low fee rate. I think a proper information system audit you have to do. You have to plan it. You have to get acquainted, correct? And if you folks are anybody of you interested in pursuing a career in information system audit, you can always reach out to me a little later after the session. Either my organization or my network, I can always see where I can place you. Coming back, so RBI, banking, NBFC cooperative, I see a huge potential in that particular place. Okay. The next is Securities Exchange Board of India, SEBI. Now, all of these securities exchange market participants, all of the securities exchange market participants, including any intermediary, they have to be subject to an audit. Okay, and there are clear-cut cases where SEBI is given, hey, if you are a stockbroker, these are the things you have to do. If you are, let's say, a merchant banker, you need to have this and this is what you need to do. And these are again mandatory requirements. And it is fairly easy for you to go ahead and do all these engagements. Go ahead, reach out to them, have some bit of expertise, build in a couple of cases, get them together a few people and get started with it. I think whatever is the lowest hanging fruit I think we need to get started with that. Next. Now, how do I follow? Sir, I don't know how to do an audit. It's little difficult for me. Is there a framework where which I can consider? There are, yes. Obviously, your underlying principles will become your SA, Standard on Auditing, which our own institute is given. Section 143 of the Companies Act, there is the requirement of internal controls over financial reporting. There is an excellent guidance given by our institute on the IFC. I think all of us have to go through that and explore it. Why? It talks about what exactly is internal financial controls, entity level controls, process level controls, application level controls, IT general controls. All of them are clearly being explained. How should you approach this? And there is also a follow-up to this document, which is internal financial controls exclusively for small and medium companies. I think it makes a lot of sense for you to go ahead and subscribe to that, go ahead and get started. You may probably find it very, very handy and useful for various purposes. So please go ahead and look into that. And they speak about something called as a risk control matrix. Risk of material misstatement, ROMM. So there's a beautiful risk control matrix which our institute website, if you go visit it, you will get that information, correct? And it talks about how you need to define, structure, all of these, correct? And then comes your Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Now, this Sarbanes-Oxley Act, let me tell you, my dear friends, is something from a US standpoint. US Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which is nothing but Indian IFC, correct? Of course, it came up first in the US. So that's why people rightly call it as US Indian IFC as US SOX. Right? It's a wonderful initiative by the government in order to check whether these controls are under verification. Is somebody regularly monitoring it? So those are definitely good checkpoints. So I think you can probably look into it, and these are applicable for all companies who have their holding company in US, the subsidiary in India. SOX is applicable to that. Then you have this ISO 27001, which is another beautiful standard, information security management standard. Okay, Again, the gist of the standard is publicly available. If you ask me, that standard gives you 114 controls. If you verify those 114 controls itself in any organization, 60 to 75%, or even I would say 85% of the information security can be in place. And let me tell you, such is the beauty of that standard. It's a very simple, straightforward. Of course, it's not a rule-based standard, it's a principle-based standard. To some extent, there are some bit of rules which is being defined, but that's okay. The moment you read that requirement, and there is something called as an SOA, statement of applicability, again, all of them are publicly available. Just go download it. It's such a beautiful standard that it will give you a perspective of what exactly information security is. In fact, this I'll cover it a little later towards this. Then you have the ITIL, which is Information Technology Infrastructure Library. Then you have COBIT. COBIT, I'll tell you, my dear friends, is such a beautiful standard which anybody and anybody can actually go ahead and refer. Okay, I'll show you how you can actually go ahead and download COBIT as well. Okay, I'm trying to share my entire screen. So because I think I'll be navigating through multiple windows, so please give me that benefit of doubt. Oops, I think I shut my computer itself. Sorry for that. Just give me 1 minute. Quickly going to that framework of COBIT. You could just go to this ISACA website and you can download what is called as the COBIT toolkit. Okay, you can just go ahead and type the COBIT toolkit. Just go type for COBIT toolkit. And this, let me tell you, my dear friends, is such a beautiful guidance which talks on, gives you a very nice illustrative list of, you know, a checklist of items, if I could probably say that. Okay, here of course is a COBIT 5 toolkit. You can go in here, COBIT 2019 toolkit also, you can type here. And if you navigate it, of course, here you'll have to fill up your details. The ISACA website was just upgraded a couple of days back, so please excuse me if I'm not able to show you the right thing. Okay, this is the COBIT guide, which is a paid resource. This is a COBIT toolkit, which is also available. I'll probably see if I can show that to you. And that is an excellent document which has a bucket list, a beautiful checklist, where you can actually do a whole lot of interesting things there. So let me see one of it. Okay, I think I have not put that into my drive. Okay, so that is available again into the institute website. Again, you can please go ahead and pick it up. That's another beautiful document. And next comes your cybersecurity framework. The cybersecurity framework is given by the NIST, National Institute of Standards, basically. They set standards for the US government. But the beauty of those standards is they can be applied by all of us. They can be applied by all of us. So that's the beauty of their standards. I think it's worthwhile to go ahead and take a try. Then you have what is called as the Pci Standards. Again, freely available, downloadable. Payment card industry standards. It comes with a small list, a bucket list. Go through it. You can implement it again very easily. Not too complicated. It's more of a checklist-driven approach. Then comes your SSAE 16, which is now called as SSAE 18. It's been replaced. You have what is called as a SOC engagements. Again, we're going to cover this a little later, so I'm going to reserve it for that. COSO Cube. Now, COSO is a beautiful internal control guidance framework. Okay, so it's basically what I call it as enterprise risk management. It comes with an integrated framework, a beautiful framework which they have come across with, which can help you to perform or define controls at any given organization. And they have what is called as point of focus, COSO point of focus. So they have close to about 17 principles for the COSO framework. And against each of these 70 principles, you will find what is called as the point of focus. For example, if you're doing an audit only at the board level or at the senior management or at the governance level, you just have to pick up those first 5 points which you notice, control and management. If you're doing a risk assessment, you have to focus on 6 to 9. Focusing on audit or focusing on controls, what is it that they have there? You have to focus on 10 to 12. If you're focusing on information and communication, you have 13, 14, and 15. Or if you're focusing on monitoring, you have 16 and 17. Each of them have a drill down version of what is called as a point of focus, again, which is publicly available, which you can go ahead and pick it up. Okay, maybe you can write to me. I can also share what are the information which is available so that you can also use it in a much easier fashion. Now, this, let me tell you, my dear friends, COSO point of reference and the COSO framework is a huge implementation exercise. All that requires from you is a proper command on these 17 different principles and their ERM framework, and you are ready for implementing it for any companies. You need to have a practical, you need to have a theoretical view of it, and of course practical knowledge on internal audit, which you would have definitely got over a point in time, or risk assessments. Then comes your standards and framework on audit. Okay, for ITGC, IT application controls and SOC. Again, we're going to cover that. We're going to speak a little later. Then you have what is called as the HIPAA compliance. HIPAA is basically Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Basically, it's the data privacy law for healthcare. Typically operates in US. In India, we have an equivalent regulation, but it was scrapped. It was called as DISHA, D-I-S-H-A. You can probably Google it up. Okay, and that focus on healthcare, digitization of healthcare records. Our Honorable Prime Minister, I think in the last year's Independence Day speech, made a mention of digitization of electronic health records, EHR. That's a huge potential which is going to come up in the next few years, and audit requirements for them also is going to increase. So that's another equivalent standard which you can probably look into. SOX, I focused. GDPR, again, we'll touch upon this in the data privacy segment or any other privacy related segment. So I've just given you a perspective of what is possible in an IT audit. And now I'm going to go a little deeper into what is called as a specialized type of IT audit. It's called ITGC, IT General Control Audit. 80% of the IT audits performed across the globe is ITGC. I would probably say even 95% also. I wouldn't be wrong, because most of them focus on the general controls and not on the application controls. Any IT audit has got two buckets: IT general controls, IT application controls. General controls refers to those set of controls which you need to adhere or you need to meet, or through which you will probably go ahead and access the main resource. A simple example, let us go back to the so-called movie of Bahubali, okay, where you've seen that, you know, the movie scene setting, and the junior Bahubali's mother is inside that fort. Okay, let's presume that to be a fort which is fairly well protected, and this Bahubali as a person who's trying to come into that fort in an unauthorized manner, correct? Now he breaks open, somehow he comes into it, somehow he jumps, whatever he does, all those mischief, and he enters into it. So he is an attacker who comes into it and steals some data and goes away. Now if I have to refer this from an information security angle, this pathway through which he did, whatever risks which he basically exposed the organization or that kingdom to, is what you do an audit in ITGC. IT general controls are those controls which operate on a generalized manner and in a uniform manner. It is sometimes not specific to any particular application. Let's take your own office. The moment you physically come into your office, there may be some check or somebody does a verification of ID card, etc., and only then you come inside. Okay, that is one. The second way possible method is, you came into the office, you started using a laptop, IT resource, but it asks you for a password. Password is the simplest form of an IT general control. You are asked to authenticate yourself every time you are accessing a particular application or a website. It's another example of a IT general control. So IT general controls are those which are specific and those which are relating to not just one application, generally overall. That is why we use the word, it is pervasive in nature, or it's an indirect control. That means it is spread across everywhere. So if I have to say this is a fundamental baseline control. Okay, and auditing this, let me tell you, my dear friends, huge potential, huge opportunities. Okay, it could be information security, it could be program changes, it could be system development life cycle, it could be IT operations, day-to-day batch processing. You can speak about real-time processing versus batch processing, all of those preventive controls, detective controls, a bunch of those things gets covered over here. And the last very interesting thing is identity and access. How are you identifying yourself and accessing it? Access related. Access is not just for computers, it could be for networks, it could be for operating systems. Go back to the first slide I was speaking of, correct? Access to the network, access to the operating system, access to the application, access to the IT environment, infrastructure, the list keeps on going. And this, my dear friends, is a simple scope if you ask me. If you wish to, you feel free to take a screenshot also, I'm okay with it. If you look at it at a high level, you get the entire perspective of how the ITGC works. You have the extreme left a pillar which is called as a system development lifecycle. Then you have the third pillar which is the program changes. First and third, fairly related. If you're developing for the first time, it comes under the last. Comes under the first. If you're doing some changes with the existing system, it comes under the third. And what you do on a day in and day out basis comes under computer operations, batch processing. I'll give you a simple example. There was an organization where we did an audit. The batch runs happens once in every 15 days. So the 25th of March, the batch run took place. The next batch run took place on the 10th of April. But we all know 31st March is the cutoff period. So what does this batch do? There is an SAP or there is a financial system. There is a reimbursement software. From reimbursement software, the software, it will download and push all the expenses. The reimbursement payments happen independently. The bank payments, whatever is there, that is, let's not get into it. Basically, there's an expense. That expense has not been accounted in the software as of 31st of March. Why? There is a relationship between both these folks that once in 25 days or once in 15 days only the upload will happen. And coincidentally, the upload happened on 25th. The upload did not happen on 31st. It just happened on next 10th. So there was 7 days of data. 35 minus 25, whatever that, 6 to 7 days, 1 week's data was not uploaded. And March 31st was the cutoff, and we had to verify. And when we verified the overall claims or overall expenses versus the actual amount input, there is a delta. Why? Because of this simple logic. How did we catch hold of it? Batch processing. Correct, interface processing. You are booking something through a Swiggy app and automatically there is a message which comes to Paytm, or from Uber app, Paytm app opens up. Correct, so there's a lot of interfaces built in. Periodical backups. A whole bunch of these things comes under your IT controls, computer operations. Then you have last, which is your access. Access could be to applications, access could be to database, access could be to the network, operating system, a bunch of access related. And it is not just access. Who gives access? How is access given? What is the approval procedure? Correct? How is access revoked? Very important. In this work from scenario, that's the biggest challenge. A company has left the organization, but they forgot to remove his access. That means even after leaving the organization, he can access all these IT resources. Dangerous, correct? So database administration. So all of this, my dear friends, comes under access limit. And there has been cases, it happened even in a few banks also, that the perpetrator or mischievous person or malicious person went back into the database, added, modified, deleted something directly to the backend. He went directly to the backend and started doing this. So there is no trail, nobody in the front end knows, but if I take the download the financials, my numbers looks distorted. So like this, a lot of things are possible, and that is what you aim to focus on. Where do ITGCs fit in? If you notice over here into my chart, I would have made a mention that your ITGCs comes over here, right? Risk arising from use of IT system, that is what your IT general controls focus on. And there are multiple manual controls, IT dependent controls, automated controls, etc., which further scale up. So what you do typically in ITGC, you evaluate the controls, you discuss with the stakeholders, identify what the key processes. It could be for accounting, it could be for operation, it could be for expense booking, it could be for reimbursement, it could be even for petty cash. You try to identify. Assess the NDE obvious, then see what is the reliability of the source data. How am I able to get it? And then if required, you may have to test it. Now why I say this? For example, in a bank, if you go, you will be able to download an NPA report. And that NPA report, what you download from a bank, typically comes from where? System. So how sure am I that the information in the system is not altered? How sure am I that the information which is there into the system is not subject to change, unauthorized modifications, confidentiality, integrity, availability, etc. Then comes your risk-based sampling, and then comes reporting to the man. So that's the whole bucket of this IT journey. And this is just to give you a perspective. If you look into any organization, let's say there are 4 systems: SAP, REBS, COTS, BILSYS. Each of them has a separate database, and each of them are hosted on a separate server. Correct? So IT organization, structure, governance, the management, the database controls, operating system controls, all of this, what you see on maroon are basically IT general controls. What you see in the blue are application controls. Simple example, in Tally, unless debit is equal to credit, the entry will not get passed. That's an entry at, that's a control at what level? It's in Tally. It's not in a general control, it's an application control. Okay, at this point in time, I'll probably stop sharing and I'll take a few questions and few of your thoughts before I jump into the next section. Any of your panelists want, any of your attendees want to, ask a few questions? I'm not sure if you're allowed to unmute yourself, but you can definitely post it in the chat.
Yeah, as of now, no questions. I request members to post your questions or raise your hand. If you raise, our IT admin will allow you to speak. Members, please throw your questions. Speaker is ready to answer all your queries. Please post your queries or raise your hand if you want to do it orally.
On a lighter side, Cisco WebEx also tells out of 20 or 50 how many attendees we have, correct? It will say typically how many of them are paying attention and how many of them are not paying attention.
Yeah.
So there's a simple audit procedure which we can just,
One can check that.
Yeah. Just have to double click on the attendees and you just have to click on that exclamation and you will get it. Couple of them now changed, so therefore now they're keeping their screens on. Just on the fun side, my dear friends, nothing. I understand all of them have their priorities, but yeah, considering the fact that we have decided to spend a couple of hours on this, I think let's focus on that. That's all. That's the only
Yeah. See, our idea is to disseminate as much as possible. That is the reason we record and upload it also. People, whenever they find time, they will see. So we publish the programs and they will see at their leisure time. End of the day, if they are interested, they will learn something. That is the very purpose. Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So that was just a quick break.
It's okay.
We can get back into business. The next area which I find potential is internal financial controls. Okay, by the way, each of these topics which I'm speaking of is something which I can speak for 3 to 4 hours as well. That is not the intention. The intention is not to bore you. The intention is to give you a guideline that, hey, this is something which is you have not yet explored. Please go ahead and try it. This is something what you have not done. Because let's also see what's going to happen in the future. The regulatory perspective of audit is also changing, and probably the government may very soon go into a self-certification mode for various things. Some things, of course, will be subject to hardcore regulatory audits, but there could be various things which could come under a possible self-certification mode, which means our avenues for engaging professionally is going to dry up if you just go ahead and based on the typical audit approach. So that is where we ought to explore these additional areas. That becomes definitely a value addition. So internal financial controls. Now, what is an IFC? This is basically defining financial controls. And what is a control? It's a policy, it's a procedure, it is an organization structure, it's a practice, whatever you can call it, but it is adopted by the company for ensuring orderly and efficient conduct of its business so that the business is not interrupted, including regulatory compliances, etc. At the same time, you should be in a position to prevent, detect frauds and errors. So That's the high level expectation, especially after the Satyam scandal happened. Okay. And the need was felt and the heat was felt in the Indian situation. And many of us in India thought, or the regulators thought, say that, okay, just like what happened in US, there was this, what is this thing called as, there were two of these major frauds which took place in US, Enron and WorldCom. Now that made people rethink on the way in which they should approach security, and they should look into internal controls. And that's when they brought in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Okay, and in Japan it's called as the JSOX. In United Kingdom it's called as the Turnbull Guidance. So just giving a perspective of the global regulation. So therefore you also understand that this is basically not something unique with India. It's common across the globe. So what exactly do you want at IFC? What exactly was the purpose of IFC communities? You are focusing on effectiveness and efficiency of operations, and you are trying to put in controls in place to prevent and detect frauds, to prevent and detect let's say errors, to safeguard your assets, ensuring accuracy and completeness of accounting transactions, reliability of financial reporting. So all of these are areas where your IFC you typically focus on. And this is something which is very important. When you focus on IFC or internal controls for that matter, the components are very, very important. Understanding of controls which are applicable across the entity, understanding of controls which are specific to a process, understanding the IT controls which may be generic or something very specific. If it is generic, okay, it could be specific. You have a bucket over here, IT general controls and IT application controls, correct? Let's take a few examples to understand this better. We're talking about entity level controls. We're talking about corporate governance. We're talking about policy procedures. How are the ethical standards? What is the impact of culture, responsibility, accountability? All those things comes in. So you will have to define, review, verify. Probably if you are a consultant, you can go ahead and set up these policies as well. Then comes your process level control. Your fixed assets, your inventory, procurement, all of those are specific to a process. It could be your order to cash, you procure to pay, it could be hire to retire, which is your payroll cycle. All of those gets covered in the process. And then you have the IT controls, where I keep on making mention, controls relating to the application, controls relating to access, controls relating to environment. That is where you need to understand the multi-dimensional approach of internal audit. Let's look into a simple example. If you have to audit IFC, a typical thought process is this. You first look into the planning. You start off, you see whether there's a significant account balance or a disclosure. It should have been done, it should not be done, etc. What is the impact? What is the flow of such transactions? Identify the risk of material misstatement. Identify, do I have a controls, and see what is the related technology element to it. To give an example, let us say I'm talking about a NPA, non-performing asset, a provisioning relating to that. Now you know that it is an item which you have to disclose and it is significant. And in case an NPA is not recognized, your financials, or for that matter, your true and fair view is impacted. So what is the control for it? You know that, once in 90 days, of course, as well, once in 180 days, if there are no transactions, they used to pass the entry, or, the system automatically classifies. Now you go and verify what is the rule or the logic. Now, earlier, what used to happen, even if some dummy credit used to appear in that particular ledger, let's say, interest income was credited, interest income on savings bank account was credited to the loan account and then recredited back to the savings bank account. Okay, even in those cases, the system used to understand that, okay, there was a credit, therefore it's no longer an NP. So that is where you need to be very critical and understanding the IT environment. So that is where the planning phase comes. Next comes the design and the implementation phase. So here what you do is you assess the design of controls. Now this is very, very critical. Now what do you mean by design of controls? Going back to my example, the refrigerator, the way in which it has been arranged, that's a simple example how the design is structured, correct? And whether the controls are being implemented effectively. And if the controls are being implemented effectively, you check whether the controls and the design, is it sufficient enough or not? If the answer is yes, you may probably go to the next level, which is plan the operating effectiveness. If the answer is no, you will go back and say, assess the audit impact and plan other suitable procedures. That's the typical thought process you will apply. Then comes the element of operating effectiveness. Now, what is an operating effectiveness? I told you, you pick up sample. I told you the example of a security guard. Mere security guard is not sufficient. You have to check whether was he present on the days and is he doing his work on a duly required manner. Correct. Likewise, it is not just sufficient if the refrigerator has all the systems. It has to be, the coolant has to be on, or the power has to be always supplied, and it should be, you know, you cannot keep the door of the refrigerator open always just because you want a cool, you wanted that particular place to be really cool. Correct. So operating effectiveness is where that comes in. You plan the nature, timing, and extent. You perform the operating effectiveness testing. You assess what could be the possible findings, what is the impact, and then you form an opinion. Now here what we normally do is we identify whether the control is a annual control, quarterly control, monthly control, or maybe even a daily control or a recurring activity. If it is an annual control, we pick up one sample because obviously it's only population and annual as well. If it is a quarterly control, we pick up 2 samples. If it is a monthly control, we pick up 3 to 4 samples. If it is a daily control, we pick up maximum of anywhere between 25 to 40, depending upon the risk. If the risk is high, we pick up 40, otherwise we pick up 25. Verify for that 20 or 30 samples whether the rule or the operating effectiveness works. For example, pick up 25 purchases and check for all the 25 purchases whether have I obtained the 3-way quotation. Whether have I obtained, let us say, done the matching of the goods receipt note with the invoice with the purchase order. Right? So that is what I will do, and that is what creates or informs whether the system is operating effectively. And once I do that, I form an opinion. Okay, and based on this, I decide, okay, whether there is an impact on my overall risk. How do I form an opinion on the overall financial statements? And that's where the end comes. Correct. And just to give you a perspective, my dear friends, this chart, what you see is called as a swim lane diagram. Swimming, right? Swimming. You have that swimming lane. The swimming lane diagram, because if you go a professional swimming pool, not for a fun or recreational, where races, competitions are, you'll find that there is a thin line which is already marked. And if you look into these competitions, you'll find that rubber thing which is floating from here to there. Correct. So that one swimmer doesn't cross he is given that lane, just like a running race track. The same way, this is called as a swim lane, where it swims through the entire process, and on the left hand side, you can. This itself could be a deliverable for you, which you can provide to an organization. And there are tools available which can do this. Okay, there's something called Microsoft Visio. You can go ahead and use that. If those of you are having Microsoft Excel, the latest version, this comes as an add-in. You can go ahead and try that, or even a simple Excel flowchart also works. Now we are shifting gears and moving to a little different, and this is called as a forensic audit. Now, forensic audit is also something which is gaining importance in the recent past. August 31st, the Institute has released the compendium of forensic accounting and investigation standards, the first in the entire world, any organization to come forward and issue at least a principles or a guideline on what exactly a forensic audit is. Correct. So that's something really worth mentioning about our institute, and I highly recommend you can go pick it up. You will find it online. Again, you can go and download it. It's an examination and evaluation of a firm's individual or firm or individual, of course, the financial information, so that you are able to produce it before the court. The purpose of a forensic audit is to only give the proof that this is what happened, so that the court can accept it or review it. Correct? It is typically connected to prosecute a person saying that boss, this fellow did the fraud. Correct? Or if sometimes the fraud is being put on somebody else's name and that fellow, the fraudster, has escaped, to prove that this person is not guilty and other person is guilty. Correct? It could be because of a fraud, embezzlement, or any of the typical cases. Now, what do you want to achieve in a forensic audit? It could be multifold. Because not every time by just doing forensic audit, okay, arrest happens and jail, all those things. No, there could be a lot of off the record adjustments or off the record settlements also. Okay, so use the forensic auditor's conclusion to facilitate a settlement of debt, a claim, a jury award. Correct? All of this. And let me tell you, my dear friends, It is also used sometimes in preventive methods. How to preventive methods to avoid fraud and theft, correct? To formulate a comprehensive governance policy, to create a so-called work environment, correct? So it actually helps you to a whole lot of extent on how you as an organization can also use it for the purpose of a prevention, etc. Now, what are the services typically included in forensic audit? You can review financial statements. You do what is called computer forensics. That's another interesting space where some bit of digital forensics you do. Electronic discovery, discovering where what happened. Bankruptcies and insolvencies, seeing how things have moved, things have changed, bankruptcies have come in, correct? Workplace related fraud investigations, wherever frauds have taken place in a particular location, workplace. Calculating of economic losses, this happens in insurance claims, etc. Business valuations, again a requirement under a few of these contracts. Professional negligence also, these are a few typical places where you can get involved into a forensic audit. So how do you analyze, or what are procedures? You do some bit of data analytics that is very important. In fact, towards the end, I'll speak about it. You apply some analytical procedures, ratios. It's as good as an audit, but you go a little more. So you are coming with the belief that, okay, something is already mischievous and you only want to double check it or double confirm. In an audit, you think that, everything is fine unless I come to know something is mischievous. Here, everything is fraudulent unless I get to know something is okay. So that's the mindset I'm talking about, right? Analytical procedures. Then as an inspection, you verify or physically to the premise, you observe, correct? You might have to do some bit of external confirmation, correct? There might be some bit of recalculation and reperformance involved. Inquiry, discussion, talking, interviews, correct? So these are typically the forensic audit procedures which are done. And there's one nice approach to investigation. It's again available online. It's called as the Diners Compass for Fraud Investigation, and it talks about 8 broad things which you need to do. The first thing is understand what is the environment. Of course, it's called as a fraud environment, but we normally say understand the environment. And then see what are the possible risks based on that. What could the fraudster have done? Because many a times after the issue or after the attack or after something has gone wrong, you realize, oh, there is something which is I should have reacted and things like that. Correct. So understand what are the types of fraud. Then how is the fraud executed, or what could have been the mechanism through which it's executed? Some method. Then look into discovery. Now, there was a recent case where we are doing some bit of investigation where all the payments have happened on a completely authorized manner. And if I go look into the invoice, everything looks legitimate. If I go to look into GST2 website, everything looks legitimate. Everything looks fairly legitimate. So I am not able to figure out where from. But there is a case of embezzlement. So it's a case of collusion. And what is the collusion? The collusion took place between a person over here and the vendor. So instead of taking a project instead of getting an invoice for 50,000, he used to get the invoice for 70,000, 80,000. And that 80,000 invoice was compared with, or rather was made the payment, whereas in reality 50,000 should have was the actual expenditure. So invoice was 80 and there was a kickback which went off in the form of cash or whatever method. Now in these sort of scenarios, it becomes very difficult. So we had to literally go review the budgeted documents, see what the budgeted documents are. This is this. And we also try to make use of some other alternate methods, try to get some information from the vendors, saying that we wanted balance confirmation, give me a statement of ledger and a lot of things. We've had to go through email chains to understand what is the possible impact. So a lot of things had to happen, and that's where the discovery phase came into picture. Next, preliminary evidence evaluation. How do I get the evidence? What is it that I have to do? What is the information? How do I collect it? Correct? And then identify the perpetrator, whoever is the possible perpetrator, the accomplice, correct? And then see, is there an element of undiscovered fraud as well? This is what you got to know. There could have been much more methods, right? So that's simple. That's a typical approach which you can take up whenever you're doing a fraud investigation. So you have an initial predication, you have something going wrong, you have some tips from complaints, tips or complaints. You evaluate that there's some accounting clues, there are some other sources, and you see whether that the predication is sufficient enough. If the answer is no, you just stop it. If the answer is yes, you go ahead and start developing it. what is a fraud theory, who might have been involved, what might have happened, what is the allegation. Okay, determine where the evidence is, whether it's on book, off the book, internal, external, and is this so we look into a bunch of these. You have to keep on doing on a reiteration basis. There was another case where which we were doing an investigation, and what happened was payments used to be made to the vendors. Okay, and it was actually made to the vendors where even invoices were not there, but the payments used to go to the vendors. So the only way we were able to identify this, we just check which are the payments made to the vendors where TDS is deducted and where TDS is not deducted. So all the fake invoices, the TDS was not deducted. So with that simple method, we were able to at least get into some sort of a conclusion saying that, okay, this is what is the fraud. How do you define a fraud detection program? This itself is one more engagement which you can do. So you create a profile of the fraudster. What are the possible risks? What are the frauds? Right? In fact, you can do what is called as a fraud risk assessment. That itself is a professional opportunity. Right? Fraud risk assessment. You can search on my YouTube. I've spoken on one of these sessions on fraud risk assessment. Right? Quantify what the risk is. Mention what the risk is. Once you've quantified the risk, do some bit of ad hoc testings, trial and error. Identify areas where you can repeat it. Sometimes you may have to use software, macros, technology. Communicate and notify to them. Okay. Of course, you have to be very careful in communication because a fraudster may actually be very careful enough to, even if he gets one small clue, he may probably go ahead and delete the entire system. So you need to be very, very careful, right? And focus on some bit of broken links. Repeat this entire process. That's typically how your fraud detection works. It comes a concept called data privacy. Okay. At this point in time, is there any questions which has come in the chat window? Let me quickly see if there's any questions in the chat window. Okay, nothing so far. So I will keep it going. Is there a Q&A window here also?
No, so far no questions.
No, so far no questions. Okay. Okay. At least participants give me a heads up or a thumbs up if things are going fine. If this is what you expected, if you have something more, at least one heads up, thumbs up, all okay, yella okay message. So this is the problem with
I think it is going good. This is the problem of virtual.
yeah. That's what I was just speaking with BT Jetty sir, saying that sometimes you don't even know on the other end people are there or
not. I am there. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay. So those were just on just to break the monotony. Let's quickly get going. So now what we're going to do is we are going to quickly jump into another area where there is a humongous potential, and I'm noticing this. Let me tell you, you will have to brace yourself because this is going to be the next game changer for the next 3 to 5 years, and that's data privacy. Data privacy. The need for data privacy across the globe and the privacy audits across the globe is.
Yeah, I have a question, Elangovan, now. See yes, how this everyone talks about data privacy. How exactly a small firm like ours, we are using some cloud thing also, something are standalone. So many things are happening. How actually the data privacy, how we can, a small firm, cost-effective suggestions, you give me something.
Sure. So before we head into it, because one of the most commonly mistook or misunderstood concept is data privacy and data security. Both of them are two different things.
Okay.
Security refers to protecting your data. Okay, ensuring that no unauthorized person has access to it. That's what is called confidentiality. No unauthorized person modifies it. So your data, I should not be in a position to modify. That's called integrity. Correct? And no unauthorized person should withhold your data, because withholding of the data is a new problem which is taking place now. A simple example of withholding of data is this ransomware attack. Ransomware comes into your system, touch wood, and it hijacks your data. And when I say hijacks your data, that means the entire data is encrypted and they ask you for money. So typically in Bitcoins or any of these methods, so that you can actually go ahead, give that money, and then he'll give you back the data. Again, there's no guarantee there, correct? And it's asked in Bitcoin so that you cannot trace it or any of these virtual currencies. So this is where security of the data comes. Now, where does privacy of the data comes? Privacy comes into, okay, first and foremost, what is privacy? This is something which nobody had spoken of and discussed. In general parlance, everybody has their own this thing. But generally, what do you say? Hey, some information I don't really like sharing with you. It's my private information, privileged information, something which only I should know. Correct? And that is where I think about 2 or 3 years back, or maybe about 4 to 5 years back, not less than 5 years, the Supreme Court came up with a very, very interesting case, and it defined what is privacy. Okay, it defined what is it. In fact, went ahead and said private, not data privacy, just said privacy. Privacy is a fundamental right. It said what? Privacy is a fundamental right. Just like we have the, I think, Article 20 or 21, which speaks on that freedom, freedom to choose what you want, freedom to speak, etc. It also respects on the other end the privacy. Right? You cannot keep on doing anything without disrespecting the privacy. A simple example could be you write your phone number in one place. It could be a register book, it could be some application. You keep on getting calls and messages on WhatsApp. Who has given that person the permission? Nobody is given. That means he is actually going against your privacy. So what is privacy focusing on? Privacy focuses on personal identifiable information. What is it called? PII. Privacy focus on personal identifiable information. Now, why I'm saying this has become a very, very important thing is today data is being misused extensively. Okay, and people are monetizing data. Literally, just to give a couple of examples, direct monetization, bartering, trading with information, trying to give you some products or services, selling raw data as a service, offering insights, analysis. So all of these are the direct data. Then you have indirect data. You have improvising of process, developing the new products, building or solidifying partner relationship, publishing brand indexes. So like this, there are a lot of methods through which they're monetizing it. A simple example would be, somebody comes and registers in a portal, they have all your personal information, and now they can actually start selling you what your preferences are, what your choices are, etc. Let's say you have chosen a product last time, and you know that a person who has chosen this product always wants to choose some other related products. So he keeps on pushing those sort of advertisements and information to you. So how do I try to control that? And how do I sort of prevent it? And that's where your data privacy and the data privacy regulations come into play. Okay, if you take it to our own CA offices, let's take our own CA offices, like how Mr. B.T. Shetty was making mention. He did mention that our own offices, how are things taken care? Correct. Let's look into two perspectives. One is the confidentiality of the data. How well have I kept my data onto the cloud? If I'm using a cloud application, you need to ask him, boss, how is the security at your cloud? He will say, sir, everything is safe. That's all. That is a layman's language. Correct. Everything is safe is a very layman's language. You need to ask him what are the technical specifications. Simple example, ask him 3 or 4 questions. First, where is the data stored? He will say cloud. Cloud also, it cannot be on the air, right? It has to be in some country. What is a cloud, sir? Cloud is somebody else's computer, that's all, which can be accessed 24/7 anytime. Instead of it being a small computer, it is a fairly large data server or a fairly large data system. You can just Google for, or you can search in YouTube how Google servers clouds are, how Amazon clouds are. Okay. Anyways, coming back. So first asking a very basic question, where are you, which country or which location are you going to store the data? Most of the cloud service providers, at least the modern companies, they all host their data through Amazon Web Services. And Amazon Web Services has only one data center in India. If it's a startup who is not very focused on security, he would not have chosen data hosting in India. He would have chosen hosting in US, because the hosting in US is cheaper compared to hosting in India. Now you must be thinking, sir, what does it make a difference if I host the data in India or in US? Regulatory requirement says that your data should be in India only, especially financial, confidential, sensitive information. Second, imagine his data center was in Afghanistan. Imagine his data center was in Afghanistan and there is a political turmoil, correct? I mean, we'll not get into what's going on, but we all know there is a political instability. And tomorrow they say that, boss, disconnect the connectivity with the rest of the world. Over. Your data is lost there forever. Correct? You will say, no, sir, it is there in Google Drive. I agree. Google Drive also, it is opening there, right? The server, the data is stored there. So you need to understand that very, very clearly for any of the cloud applications. Second, what is the extent of my information that fellow can access. I have uploaded one file, can he go ahead and view what that file is? If he can do it, what is the purpose and how is he restricting it? Sometimes you may have to give an access. I'll give a simple example. You're using a cloud app, you have uploaded something, and you are saying that there is an error. And for that purpose, he has to be given that access. That is okay. Correct? But every document you upload, he is continuously going, reviewing, etc. That becomes a problem. Correct? So you need to understand how that security is built. Third, how safe is he keeping the information? Is he using any encryption standards? And that encryption should be at two places. Encryption when the data is stored, which is popularly called as encryption at rest. And one more encryption when you're pushing the data from your system to there, which is encryption in transit from my computer or my system to theirs. So these are two encryptions which you have to enforce. Okay, so this is the basics of security which you will ask any person when they are saying that, hey, mine is a cloud-based application. Rest all will come a little later. Okay, so coming back, now that is on a cloud-based from a security angle. Now from a privacy angle, you will ask the same person, boss, I have saved my contact numbers of my clients. Will you have access to all of those? Now, if he has access to all the contact numbers of your clients, that is a dangerous scenario. Why? The client has given his contact number to you or your CFM. That means anybody in your CFM is authorized to contact. Why is there another external party contacting? Correct. So that is where your data privacy actually being correct. So I'll not speak about how companies are using. The list is endless. If you look into Netflix, you know that Netflix day in and day out, they keep on giving you suggestions, recommendations. And when you say Netflix, for that matter, YouTube, Amazon Prime, etc., they keep on giving you so many suggestions based on your viewing behavior pattern. There's another company which does restaurant-based analytics or restaurant-based analysis, where they see what is the footfall, how many people are coming, based on that it gives you recommendations. Okay, whether to cook more, whether to cook less, etc. Look into the other example. This is a toothbrush. What is your brushing pattern of your toothbrush? This is a company based out of US. Correct. This gives this information to insurance companies. Why? To decide if you're brushing well, the insurance premium will come down. Okay. Now, why should insurance company have the access to the way in which you brush, or whether in the first place you brush or not? Correct. So that is all privacy, right? That's all your personal data. And the topmost image, what you notice is the window, how Starbucks decides where they need to place their coffee store, or wherever they have to keep their next door. It's all analyzed based on movement of people, images, CCTV cameras, whatever, the number of people involved, and a bunch of these things. So my dear friends, you can imagine what is the extent to which data privacy is being captured. Not just that. There are a whole lot of regulatory requirements today if you are capturing any personal information. Just to give an example, many of us are not aware that we have a data privacy law already in India, but it's not formalized and structured. And that is called as Sensitive Personal Data Regulations. So Information Technology Act, even though it came out in the year 2000, it was substantially amended in the year 2008. There is a beautiful set of rules which came out in the year 2011. Wonderful set of rules. In that rules, they speak of everything and anything on how you need to protect the data, how you need to take your consent. In fact, it is told that even if we as professionals are taking information from the client, we need to take a consent from them that how we are going to process and use this information. Say, for example, you have to take their information, consent, approval on how you're going to use their email ID, how you're going to use their personal information, their phone number, contact number, whatever, your Aadhaar card, whatever details we obtain from them, we need to inform them how and where we are going to use it and what is it. That is what is called consent. Correct. And we need to classify the assets based on the value. There is some folder where, let's take a simple example. We are doing this DIR KYC. I think September 30th is the due date, right? So you're calling up all these people and then doing it. You're capturing. So you're sending out an email to them. Correct. You're sending out a contact number, whatever it is. So you're trying to reach out to them. So you should be aware that, hey, you're doing a bunch of these things, and you should be very careful about this point, because we are using the number to speak out to them. Correct. You're getting into their privacy, or you're sending out an email to them, you're getting into that. That's a personal information. Correct. So determine asset retention period. Now, what's an asset retention period? How long would you want to retain an asset? Under the company law, it says that I think about 8 years. Income Tax Act says about 6 plus 2 years or whatever, correct? You may want to retain certain assets only for 1 year, 2 year. Your articles have completed their articleship. You want to retain the records only for 1 or 2 more years. So it depends. You have to define that asset retention period. Destruction do you have in place? Okay. Then have you trained your staff enough? Do you have a policy where you regularly audit this? Right? So these are few examples on the retention spaces. Now, why am I making this? Because this, let me tell you, my difference is a huge potential. There are regulations across the globe which is saying that, hey, you need to have this. It could be something to do with data privacy. It could be something to do with the way in which you obtain consent. It could be something to do with the way in which you are taking approvals. It could also be the way in which you are protecting and safeguarding data. Okay, and India, they have introduced what is called as the Personal Data Protection Bill. It is still under the bill stage. We never know when it's going to come up. Our institute, ICA, is coming up with a data privacy small guide, more like an awareness guide. I'm working with the institute for that, for drafting that. So hopefully by another 1 or 2 months, it should be out. That gives you a whole lot of perspective on what is data privacy, how it makes a lot of difference, and what is the importance of it, etc. So what are the generally accepted privacy principles? Just like how you have generally accepted accounting principles, you have what is called privacy principles. Now, these are the principles against which you audit, correct? Now, for example, who has the information? How are you managing the information? That's a very simple basic requirement. Do you have a policy? Do you have a procedure? Do you have a governance structure? Okay, how are you getting access to the PII? Second, notice. Have you given an intimation to all the data subjects or the people, whosoever data you are obtaining? Is there a policy procedure? Is there a purpose in place for which you are actually using the data and collecting it? Is there a choice or a consent? That means, have I taken that person's consent? Have I taken that person's approval? Correct? Then comes your collection. Am I collecting this personal information and am I using only for the intended purpose? Very important. Am I not have I used it for some other purposes? Correct? Usage, retention, and disposal. Am I using it? How am I retaining it? Am I disposing this information? And if I'm disposing the information, is it a permanent disposal or is it a temporary disposal? Have to be very clear. Correct? Next step. Who has access to this information? Very important. Because within your organization, not everybody should have access. It should be a restricted access, and you need to have a policy in place for that. Then comes disclosure to third parties. How are you sharing this information to a third party? Correct? A simple example could be, you wanted to apply for a digital signature for your client, and you are sharing the contact number and email ID of your client to the digital signature vendor. Now, the digital signature vendor directly calls up the client and says, boss, share the OTP. Client is thinking, what's going on? Right? So that's a simple example. Disclosure to a third party, inform them, and then go ahead and file it. Then there is an element of security. Right? The organization responsible to have a secure private information, how it is being done, etc. Then comes quality. What is the information? What is the guarantee? The information is accurate, etc. Then comes your monitoring and enforcement. Okay, I use the word monitoring and enforcement. How are you enforcing this entire system? Are you having protections in place? Are you having safeguards in place, etc., etc.? Right. So that's your ISO. Sorry, that's your data privacy, and this will become very soon a law in India. And there's a huge potential on how organizations will have to relook in the way they are obtaining the personal information. And just for information, there is also an audit ISO standard also, ISO 27701, I think, which focuses on data privacy. Okay. Next comes ISO 27001, Information Security Management Standard. Okay, it's an international standard accepted benchmark or a best practices standard, however you can call it, typically to manage your information security. I repeat, typically to manage your information security. This is considered to be a benchmark standard. Now, why do I say that? The reason why I say this is, this speaks about the benchmarking standards across any organization. If they want to, what is it that they have to look at? And ISO 27001, I told you 114 controls are defined, and these 114 controls are extremely good. It gives a good base for any organization to get started. What does the standard typically require? It requires a plan. It requires a typical schedule. It requires certain internal audits to be done. It requires an external audit, external certification. And those of you interested may probably even take up this course on ISO 27001 lead auditor course. Some of these organizations are offering that. You can go and subscribe. It's a 5-day course where they train you 5 days or 10 days course, depending on how the organizations have written it. They basically have structured it in a very, very nice and beautiful manner. It is worthwhile that you go ahead and take up this. What do you do here? You do a lot of internal audits, assess the risks, and see whether those are how in an organization it can probably materialize. What do you do in internal audit? You do some bit of documentation, review the policy, procedure, standards, see whether the policy and actual evidence doesn't make sense. Right? Then you do what is called as a field review or an evidence-based audit. Review all the evidences, whether that is sufficient. Then you analyze, is everything fine? What is the issue? What is the missing information? Then review the audit report or prepare the audit report. And once you prepare the audit report, again, there is some expectation, there is a way, format, etc. You have to look into it. And then last, you do what is called as a management review. And a management review, you would say that, okay, management is reviewed, they have identified what is the issues. You need to come up with what is called as a corrective action and a preventive action plan. Kappa tracker, we call it, correct? So is there a mechanism where you can prevent that in future? How do I correct that in future? So those are things which typically happens in a ISO 27001. And there's an element of external audit. If you've got a fair bit of experience, you can empanel yourself with a few of these certification bodies, okay? Like BSI, TUB, NQA. These are all fairly large players. So they basically, the process of external audit is more or less similar to what happens in an internal audit. But here, obviously, the person is totally independent, correct? And these will be determined by typically the certification body will bring the external auditors. So we cannot issue an ISO 27001 certificate. Maximum which we can issue is an internal audit certificate. But what the external auditor or the certification body will do is they have an authorization, they have a permission, and they will issue the certificate. Correct. So they will provide a plan for the audit, how it has been done, what is the purpose, a whole lot of things they actually come forward and take it. It comes this very, very interesting space called as SOC. Okay, and SOC refers to, earlier it was meant for service organization controls. Those of you who have fairly been in the profession for some time, you will call this as SAS 70 reports earlier. Today it is called a SOC. It was also perhaps earlier it was also called as there was a standard on auditing SSAE 16, and today that SSAE 16 is replaced by SSAE 18. Correct? So standard on audit engagement. Now, what is a SOC? Why it became very important? Let me give you a perspective. Imagine you are a company who is using the services of an outsourced organization. You basically outsource some activity to an organization. Now that outsourced organization, you're not sure whether they have controls in place. You're not sure whether they have things in place. So you are a little skeptical. You are not very sure how you should go ahead or how you should approach that audit or how you should approach that particular organization. Because a good part of the processing of data is done by that organization. For that sake, can you say that whatever happens there, I will accept it? The answer is no. Because for your customers, you would not have told that you have outsourced it. Or for your customer, he doesn't bother whether you have outsourced it or you're doing it, it doesn't bother. How he wants, he's more concerned about them. I'll give you a classical example. Air India was using the services of an organization for the purpose of some bit of data entry, book, data accumulation and various purposes. And that organization had a breach. As a result, all the customers of Air India, their data, at least a good chunk of customers of Air India, their information was compromised. Now, who had to pay who had to face the embarrassment, who has to face the penalty, who had to have the problem? It's Air India. Because Air India should have done the due diligence and checks on that outsourced organization. Now, therefore, just because we have this sort of a setup and list in place, how do I get a comfort that the outsourced organization, in my example, to whomever I've sent the outsourcing, it could be bookkeeping, accounting, it could be payroll, it could be anything, cloud. How do I get a comfort? One method is I send my auditor, he goes audits and comes. But that organization is not providing only for me, he's providing to hundreds of other companies. So the better method is instead of appointing him as one person as an auditor, that organization itself appoints one person as an auditor. That organization itself appoints one person as the auditor, and once they have appointed that person as an auditor, he does an independent examination of the systems and organization controls. That is where the SOC comes in. System Organization Controls, SOC. And that is done typically by a CPA. It is done by a CPA. But there's a whole lot of work prior to the CPA which can be done by a source. And this is an untapped market stock. Right? So I think you can probably look into it. So stand for System and Organization Controls. It is published by an audit firm, okay, which is typically a US AI CPA, and documents their independent opinion on the design and or operating effectiveness of what? Of the internal controls, whichever is relevant to the services provided to the customer. So pursuant to SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, all those fellows who are dealing with this sort of private information, this became mandatory. And internal controls on the services provided by the service organization, they give you some valuable insights, either to my company's auditors or my company's risk department, or my customers would have asked, hey, if you outsourced any work, please give me some comfort that they are, sort of controlled, etc. So that's basically what a SOC is. Few terminologies. You have what is called a user entity. Who is the user entity? Ultimate customer. Ultimate customer. Okay, entity or organization that uses the services. In my example, I am using the services of the outsourcing organization, so I am called as a user entity. To whomever I outsource, he is called as a service organization, he or she of that entity, correct? An organization or segment that provides services to the user entity. Now you have sub-service organization. That company might have further outsourced to somebody else, correct? And that is a sub-service organization. And then you have the service auditor. I told you the independent CPA auditor under the AI CPA regulations, which is the US regulations. That is the service auditor. I'll give you a classical example, okay, to explain this entire thing. You are XYZ Limited. You are using the services of Dropbox for the purpose of storage. Now, Dropbox is the service organization. You are the user entity. Now, Dropbox as user entity, your organization or your auditors may say, boss, you're storing everything in Dropbox. I'm not sure if the Dropbox controls are strong and solid. So you will ask them, boss, give me all this information, all this, etc., etc. So instead of you asking that, Dropbox itself comes and says, hey, here is my service auditor, here is my report, you take it. So the service auditor appointed by Dropbox, correct? Dropbox is the service organization, and then you have the user entity. Now there can be one more interesting thing. Dropbox is using another IT services company for some deployment, or Dropbox does not have its own server. Just for information, Dropbox does not have its own server. Dropbox hosts the data in Amazon Web Services. You can go look it up online. Amazon Web Services or Amazon becomes the sub-service organization. So I hope you got the 3-layer approach. As I told you, one more example. Example Inc. is an outsourcing its accounting and record keeping to outsourcing PH Inc. Let's say a Philippines entity. So Example Inc. is the user entity, outsourcing PH is a service organization, and the service organization appoints an AICP auditor, is a service auditor. Please bear in mind, the audit should be done by the service auditor, but all the implementation, gap assessment, doing risk assessment, everything can be done by us. Now in India, we have an equivalent standard which is called CA 3402. One of the probably I would say a highly underrated standard. Why? Because we don't see a professional opportunity with that. So what CA 3402 does is exactly this. But only difference is in a SOC there are multiple types. SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3. SOC 1 is basically for internal control. Those of you to whom you outsource the financial related work. SOC 2 is general. Okay, it focuses a little different. And then you have SOC 3, which is a general public use report. Anybody wants, they can prepare it, and it is posted on the website. So anybody wants to download, they can do it. So that's a SOC 3. And of course, it's audited as well. So all the three are audited. Correct? In a SA 3402, it is only focusing on SOC 1, which is on financial operations. Say your organization has outsourced payroll operations to one company. For that company, SA 3402 will be applicable. So deals with an assurance engagement that provides the services relevant to user entity's internal control. Whose user entity in my case? Your organization. This standard only applies when service organizations are responsible for making an assertion of the suitable control. So if the service organization defines that this is my responsibilities, as an auditor, how to audit that by service organization, 3402 comes into picture. Then you also have, I think, SA 402. 402 talks about how you as an auditor can focus on the controls of the service auditor. So that's a little different volume. So what is the purpose of it? You need to get a reasonable assurance that the system design are implemented, it is operating perfectly, or the system control objectives are suitably designed, that the controls are operating effectively in accordance with the control objectives. Correct? There is some sort of a checks on that. And the report gives a perspective of what are the various things in the service auditor, or what are the typical findings. Okay, so that is a SOC and a SAE 340. My penultimate area of discussion is analytics. This is a huge ball game, huge opportunity, and many of us do not realize that this can be done just right away. Even after my session is over, you can start off with this. Analytics is one of the most underrated and very well paid. At least it may initially take some time, but over a point in time, this is something which is very, very lucrative. What is it that you do here? Today, we all say that we have this data, we have that data, this is the volume, this is the information. But what are you doing with the data? This data, when it is analyzed, it gets converted into information. Convert that information into knowledge. And that knowledge, you convert it into insights. Okay. From that insights, can you take some action out of it? Correct. Let me tell you, the amount of data, especially the post lockdown, first lockdown, has increased at least 2 or 3 times. You know, I was reading one very nice book where the author says that if the entire life of human, or the life of universe, or whatever, has to be compressed in 1 hour, if the entire life of human being or life of the universe has to be compressed in 1 hour, he says in the last 1 microsecond, last to 1 microsecond is where all the technological advancements have taken place. That means he's literally saying that what has happened in the last few years has nothing compared to what has happened before. That is the extent of evolution of technology that's taking place. The data, the information, the knowledge, the insight, whatever you call it. And this hype of analytics is actually, it says that it is in its peak of its expectation. Many of them are expected. What are you doing in analytics? You're converting data into action. I'll give you a simple example. Have you ever tried to create a simple dashboard in Excel? Have you tried to create a Power BI based report? These are few examples. I'll show you a few demos also. I've kept last 5 to 10 minutes just for showing demos, so that you also get some idea. Okay, it should not be purely, just, oh, after the PPT I don't know what, correct? So if you see the last 1 year, data sets have grown significantly. E-commerce, Swiggy, Amazon, Zomato, Flipkart, product mix data, consumer preferences data, industry data, competitor data, CRM or leads related data, social media, ERP data, geospatial information, Google trends. I don't know how many of them have identified. Google gives on a monthly or a weekly basis, what is the most trending word which people have searched on Google in a particular region or location. Based on that, you can know what is the appetite of people. Of course, if you go search 6 months back, it was only COVID, symptoms, all those things. Now it keeps changing. Correct? How the data sets have grown significantly. And this is typically what we do in data analytics. Broadly 4 things. Okay. First is descriptive or hindsight. What happened? Historical in nature. Simple. You have a sales report. Use a pivot tool. Give it. Then come diagnostic analysis. You say, why did it happen? What went through? What was the issue? You go a little more drilling down into it. Say a pivot, you double click, you go through some more information. Segmentation. Then you have predictive analytics. Now, what is predictive analytics? You are predicting what is the forecast, what is the trend. Correct? So it's some bit of trend analysis. Sorry. Then you have prescriptive analytics. What should you be doing? What action should you take? What is your recommendation? A simple example could be a scenario manager. Last is adaptive analytics, using machine learning, using solver in Excel, using data analysis in Excel tab. I'll show that also to you a little in a few minutes from now. And many of them keep on saying, sir, analytics means I'll buy one tool and I implement everything. No, that's not the case. You need to clearly understand that tool has some set of limitations. Okay, each tool has some set of limitations. Somebody says, can I use Power BI for audit? You can use it, but that's not the purpose of Power BI. The purpose of Power BI is to give you a dashboard, to give a visualization. See, you can cut a vegetable using a butcher's knife, using a kitchen knife. You can also use a what is that? That nail cutter has that knife, no, or a Swiss knife. What is more flexible for you? That is exactly what you need to do. If you are in travel and you don't have any other equipment, even that nail cutter or the Swiss knife will be handy. Right? But if you're in a kitchen, you obviously want to use a kitchen knife. So what are the things when you decide about analytics or tools? What is it that you should be able to keep in mind? A few tips. You should be able to analyze the entire data set, entire population. You should make data import fairly easy. You should be able to join, compare, relate all this data. You should be able to give various commands and functions that it is able to do work. Correct? It should be able to position or do centralized processing. Requires minimum IT support and is able to repeat it regularly. I'll show you with Excel itself one very nice use case on how you can analyze. And then comes emerging technologies. And when I use the word emerging technologies, look at this. You and I as human beings can do multiple things. We can think, we can remember, we can feel, we can sense. We protect our fellow members, friends, colleagues, family. We perform activities repeatedly and we are normally available anytime. And our decisions are based out of data. It could be past behavior, etc. Now, this is exactly what machines can do. Industry 4.0. We can think thanks to AI. We can remember thanks to blockchain. We can feel thanks to IoT. It can protect thanks to cybersecurity. It can perform activities repeatedly thanks to RPA. It is available anytime thanks to the cloud. And these decisions are based out of data thanks to analytics. Correct? So which means this one chart gives you a perspective of what exactly is going on. And let me tell you this, my dear friends, huge potential for these emerging technologies to come up. And all of these emerging technologies requires the brain of a professional like us because we have that functional knowledge. So what you folks will have to do is use that functional knowledge, sit with colleagues, sit with people from the technology side, sit with them and see if you can develop certain scalable solutions. And that is where you'll be able to progress. Correct? So I'm not going to specify into each of them because these have been already covered. You've had a session on RPA, you've had a session on IoT, blockchain, etc. I'm just giving you a perspective of how these emerging technologies are actually coming up. Correct? How is technology penetrating into our profession? If I say cloud computing, I think all of us are already using it. There's no doubt in this. Analytics has penetrated fairly well. Most of us are already analyzing data, digital analysts, etc. RPA is coming to our profession and it's been very good, very interesting way in which it's actually taking place. AI will very soon come into a profession. I have a few use cases which I can explain. There are a couple of videos of mine speaking on how AI is coming to profession. You can probably look it up. And then there's blockchain. Blockchain will take a little longer, correct? So these are all a few examples of how technology is penetrating. So what is the key message I wanted to give before I share a couple of practical insights? The world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities, correct? So I think I've given you a perspective of what are the crazy number of opportunities which is available. I think you just have to spend a little longer to explore. And once you start exploring, you can do it. Please bear in mind, it took me at least about 5 to 8 years to reach where I am here. I also started off as a normal chartered accountant, spent some time in industry, did some bit of company law, accounting, tax, income tax, all these works I did. Right? Then slowly I started giving up various things. And today I focus only on technology and audits, risk advisory, correct? And I know that the potential which this has, and therefore I've decided to focus on this. So what do I do for the rest? I've given up. I've either given it to some other CAs, I've given it to somebody else. I've said, boss, forget it. Because remember one simple principle. Only when you give up, you can hold something better. And that is something which you have to get started. Correct? So form teams, form a network, form an association. If you are young members, team up with people, feel free to reach out to me. Come into a system where today now institute permits you multidisciplinary form. There is something called networking guidelines. There is an associate guidelines. There are so many things available. Decide that my clients are my clients, your clients are your clients, but we will do some bit of cross servicing. I will do some internal audits for your clients, you do some bit of GST assessments for my clients, and go on and remain okay. I will still be the primary point of contact to the client. I will introduce you as my associate and we'll get started. Go ahead and explore. Because unless we do that, if in our mind we are always thinking, oh, I, you will never go in it. That is a very, very important and a critical lesson which you have to keep in mind. Okay. So on that note, these are a few examples of technology enabled opportunities which you can render. In a gist, if I have to speak of, this is what I spoke of: IT governance, IT audit, IT assurance, IT general controls, analytics, GDPR or data privacy, emerging technology, IT automation implementation, forensic audits, ERMs, correct? IT consulting, some bit of IT training, ISO, Pci Standards, SOC assessments, and a bunch of those. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'll be happy to take Q&A, and I will of course show you one or two practical demos which I did make a mention, but I'll take a couple of questions and then probably jump into it. I'm available on LinkedIn and this is my email ID. Feel free to reach out. And if any of you are young members who want to, guidance on IT audit and technology, I'm always there. I'm not just young members, any members. And if you want to set up a career and if you're very serious about it, write to me. We'll probably start discussing it next week itself because I'm hiring many of them.
Yeah, I think no questions. So
shall I go ahead with a couple of demos then?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So how many of them have used artificial intelligence in Excel? Shall we try some bit of magic using Excel? Okay. Let me know if you're able to see my Excel spreadsheet. It's just taking a couple of minutes more. I think you can see the Excel spreadsheet now. Okay. There's upload pending. Okay, no problem. That's some issue with my SharePoint. Okay. So what I'm going to do, my dear friends, is I have this data set over here. Okay. I don't have time to sit and analyze this entire information. So what I do is I go click on this home tab and I say, boss, please analyze this data automatically. I don't have time. It analyzes this entire data set independently and gives some interesting information. What is it? It says, what is the sales amount by product type and color? Just insert a pivot, you got your answer. Normally to insert a pivot, we used to do insert pivot, do some bit of magic. We have nothing required. This is AI of AI and data analytics. I want sales amount by product type. Okay, click here. Got it. Now it is giving some interesting information. Hey, user ID SA accounts for majority of the sales amount. Look at this. Majority of the sales has come from here. And if I notice over here, there are blank 14 lakh also sales is taken. So you know what you have to do. Go ahead and do the audit. Now there are some more 7 results here. I go click here. What is the frequency of sales? This is something very, very interesting. What is the meaning of frequency of sales? Let us analyze this. How much of sales have taken place? This is what is called stratification. This is what is called stratification. And if you choose samples based on this, it's called stratified sample. Okay. How much of sales is between the range of 20,000 to 60,000? How much of sales is in the range of 140 to 180? And this you have to get it done in Excel. I mean, it is possible, but the time consuming is fairly heavy. Correct? So you can also see how much of analysis it is possible. Not just this, not just this. You can also ask your questions. Give me top 3, let's say product underscore type by sales. Just hit enter. It'll give me what is the top 3. This top 3 you replace with top 10. It gives you that data. You notice this? You already arranged it in the ascending order, and it gives you this entire information. You have it ready at the top order. Okay, if this is not sufficient, you want to do some more thing. Okay. Now here you have invoice number, right? Correct. Let's not go into an invoice number. Let's probably take, average. Okay. Total, or rather count of let us say Sony Xperia. Look at this, 933 phones have been sold. Right, so click of a button, you're getting all this information, filter, modify, whatever you want. Okay, forget that. Month-wise sales. Over, sir, that's all. You have this data, you want month-wise sales, click this, it automatically gives you all this month-wise sales. You have it. You can in fact say it, sorted in descending order. I'm not sure if it can give you that much also. Oh yes, it can give you that. Able to see this? And I'm not using any rocket science, not using any rocket science, just Excel, the power of AI. And this is available in your Excel sheets as well. It's available in Office 365. You just have to upgrade your license, that's all. Or Office 2019. So this is a simple example of what is perhaps possible. Any questions on this?
No questions so far, Narasimhan.
Okay.
So I think everyone understood easily. I think already they know all those things. anything you can assume.
Yeah, assumptions. There's no short for assumptions. Yeah. Okay. And also to give a perspective, some of them were asking, some of them keep asking, sir, how does an ISO audit look like, right? Or what is an ISO audit deliverable? So this is a sample report, okay? This is just an anonymized report which is available on the public domain. So you have these points. If you notice here, this is the annexure. I told you 114 controls. They are grouped under these points over here, 5 to 18. Information security policy, organization, HR, asset. Go through it. You will get, okay, you write an executive summary. Then you have a methodology. You just give some basic information. What is your major issues, minor findings, observation, correct? And then you give some conclusion. I mean, this chart in case you want to, this is just fancy stuff. You just mention what is the conformity, what is the non-conformity. For each of them, you have cross-reference. There's nothing but an index, correct? And you can go to each of them. So this is a beautiful document. This is again available, I think, in the public domain. I think I picked up. I don't know. I asked my colleague to do some research. So plan stage. This is what you did. This is what the observation. What is the observation? What is the recommendation? And it gives you a bucket list. So if you notice it very carefully, it's a very templatized driven approach. Once you do few audits, you will get an idea, and you can just ask your associate or colleague to go ahead and look into it. So that's an ISO 27001. There's another forensic audit report sample just for your reference in case you want to. This is done by some online. I found it again. You write what is the background, origin, audit objective, what is the risk, right? What is the audit process, and what is the possible evidence of risk events, conflict of interest. Notice that there's been conflicts of interest. Notice there's a bribery, there's been a theft, there's been some fraudulent transactions. For example, vendors with same PAN, 38 vendors noted. Duplication in the name of form 138. Now, this is where you apply all analytics, right? Vendors without PAN service tax VAT number 1682. Inactive vendors 1265. So why are you keeping them? Right. So these are a few examples. Then the third is a SOC report. This is again available. All of them are available in the public domain. Whatever I made a mention, you just have to do some bit of research. You will get this. Okay. So SOC report. It basically has 5 sections. First is management assertion, just like how we have that director statement or management assertion in our audit report. This is a separate document. Then you have a service auditor report. Then you explain the entire IT infrastructure. Here, this is the core section. And then you mention what exactly is the test the auditor performed and any other information he wants to make a mention. And here you will mention each and every test. Okay. Of course, here there is a type 1 and type 2. That is just for your reference. So what more is there? Let me see if I can show you a risk register. That could also be, I think I found this. There's one more risk register. Just sharing my Excel screen. Yeah. So this is an example of a risk register. What you can notice, right? You write what is the type of risk, describe the risk. You write a likelihood and an impact. Likelihood is the probability of that risk materializing. What is the impact? Right? The product of likelihood and impact is your severity, or you can probably say that it is, your inherent risk. What is the immediate action step, mitigation points? Then you have a bunch of these other interesting things. Okay, and then you can define what is the severity table, likelihood and impact. You can get an idea. These are some drop downs just to say high, low, so that people don't change whatever they feel like. Okay. You can write a mathematical formula also if you want to. That's totally left up to you. I think that's about what I wanted to share. Feel free to add in your questions and thoughts.
Yeah, I think no other questions. We had a fabulous session. I really enjoyed that. Various opportunities, how one can use Excel as a tool, and various other tools and the opportunities available in information technology. Thank you very much, Narasimhan. We had a fabulous sessions. By this, we concluding 3 days of information technology. We had all the 3 days wonderful enriching sessions. All the speakers made it fantastic, and last day this is really a eye-opener for so many opportunities. Our youngsters need to come forward, learn all this. Even after hosting in our website, let them go through this, understand, come out to take this, grab these opportunities. World is moving towards all tech-based, only cloud-based. So I think opportunities are plenty. Those who are looking for opportunity, this is a great opportunity, definitely. So I request all the members to inform your youngsters or seniors. Maybe there are seniors are much more energetic and enthusiastic than the current youngsters are. That's what I'm seeing in some places. So whoever it is, so are interested in these opportunities are plenty. So people are crying that our opportunities are going away, government is not giving audits. There are so many. If one door closes, 3 doors opens. That people are not seeing. Just for that main door only, they are looking. Where there are many opportunities, they need to look into that and put little effort. Nothing falls from sky. We need to look for everything and take it. That is the attitude we need to develop as a chartered accountants. We are expert in all the field. We can develop expertise in any field we want. That is the ground or the platform we got it from our institute. So we need to thankful. We should show our gratitude and learn all the new things. I think that's what I think Narasimhan did. Yes, as a chartered accountant, he learned these new skills, and he says the plenty of opportunities. He need not look for any traditional things. So opportunities are coming to his place. People are calling him for that. So that is open for everyone, no? Why only Narasimhan? So all people are. And Bangalore is happening place. Opportunities are plenty. So I request members, you are really interested in this, you join. At the same time, spread this news to your friends and colleagues. Let them also, if they are better late than never, let them also look into these opportunities. Opportunities keep on growing. So requirement is more, as he mentioned, all the banking institute, including cooperative banks, this kind of forensic audit going to be there. and systems audit anyhow is they have to do, I think, quarterly or half yearly. So many opportunities are available. Friends, look into this, take this opportunity, make it a lucrative. Thank you very much. Over to Divya to officially conclude.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm so glad. Thank you, members. It's my pleasure to indeed give a formal vote of thanks for 3 days virtual meet on information technology. Thank you so much for today's speaker, Nrasimhan Elangovan sir, for sparing your valuable time and giving an excellent participants. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I also thank our last 2 days speakers, CA Vivek Shah, Marita Agarwal, for also spending their valuable time and being part of our program as speakers. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much, all the participants, also for your participation. Request you to kindly look into Bangalore branch website for further programs from next week.
Happy
Thank you,
weekend.
sir.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, happy weekend
Bye.
to all of you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.